Hello, my wonderful stats students. I wanted to make a quick video. I promise it won't be too long, talking about some of the important things that I want to make sure we don't miss in chapter two. Technically, everything in chapter two does not need StatCrunch or anything like that. However, I think it is also a really good way to kind of get comfortable with StatCrunch earlier on. That way, later on, when things get a little more tricky, we already are comfortable with using the platform. So just a little reminder, StatCrunch is like Excel light in my head. Excel sometimes scares me. Some of you might be better Excel users than I, but this is, I promise you, not too scary. Okay, so first things first, on the screen here, I went ahead and pulled up the Chapter 2 guided notebook, as well as I have open the My Math Lab course of what it should more or less look like for you if you go to Canvas and then click Access My Math Lab. So first things first, you can always get to StatCrunch from My Math Lab. If you take a look at the menu on the left-hand side of your StatCrunch page, you'll click StatCrunch, and then you can click this middle button here that says StatCrunch website, and you can take a look. There's a lot of different options here. There's like my data, you can upload data if you wanted to, like sort of like you can do in Excel. There's a whole bunch of other stuff with like groups and surveys. We don't really have to worry about any of that. All you really need to worry about is clicking Open StatCrunch. So this is sort of like the long way to open up StatCrunch. You can always kind of get to it in here, depending if you just want to sort of open it and try some things out. Okay, that being said, the beauty of StatCrunch is that you don't typically need to go that roundabout way. StatCrunch is, you've paid for StatCrunch already. Like if you notice, if you just go to statcrunch.com, it'll prompt you to purchase access. You don't have to do that. You have access with the textbook. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look at some examples of what I wanted to make sure you didn't miss when you were completing your chapter 2 guided notebook and interactive assignment. Okay, so in 2.1, there are questions here that in the examples, they'll mention real quick, you blink and you might miss it in the interactive assignment, that you can use StatCrunch. So let me go ahead and click improve score. You can ignore any of those little warnings there. This is like me as a student. Okay, so I'm just gonna go ahead and navigate down to where I think the one of the examples are, so that we can hopefully kind of um, get an idea. Get out of here. I know there's a late penalty, blah, blah, blah. Okay. I had pulled this up. Here we go. Okay, so technically this is on objective one, organize qualitative data in tables. And it looks a few different ways sometimes. So this is example one. This is the guided notebook. So this is asking you to construct a relative frequency distribution of the location of the injury, and we could try that by hand. And if you click, there's like a video for by hand. But what I really like is this show technology step by step. In the interactive assignment, says show StatCrunch. Okay, so depending on the type of data, you can, it'll have this button here that just says like open the raw data in StatCrunch. Okay, that's again the beauty of having StatCrunch inside our textbook. It makes things much easier. Okay, so I know at first it just seems like, what is this? This seems like something else I have to worry about. No, I promise you, do it. Use StatCrunch. It'll make your life much easier. Okay, you'll also notice like right now I selected the window tab and I'm sort of dragging it around. What I really like to do is I like to do a little split screen with StatCrunch and My Math Lab. So if you want to try that out, again, chapter 2 is a good way just to kind of play around with StatCrunch and see what you think. If you like the split screen option, like I do, you remember you can just sort of click and drag it around and then drop it here. Otherwise, you can just, click back and forth in your windows. Okay, so that's one way that you could see this. Okay, is inside these examples and the interactive assignments, they have these. You can open the data in StatCrunch. It literally said open the raw data in StatCrunch, and then it has these step-by-step instructions. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and open up my Math Lab again and the interactive assignment just so we can see both. I have two monitors, so sometimes my split screen gets a A little crazy. Okay, so next I want to point out some things in 2.2 and 2.3. Actually, I lied. Before I do that, here's one of the questions that's inside of the interactive assignment. You know how they have like reading and then there's like a question. So I just wanted to kind of highlight what this looks like. Okay, so this is a problem that we have to do within the interactive assignment, and it's talking about train derailments, which I don't like thinking about, but it's fine. And they have a list of these letters that represent the type of train derailment. Um, this is technically question 3 in your interactive assignment. So in the interactive assignment, the question example that we saw before, it said like specifically open the data in StatCrunch. This time it doesn't have that. There's a little blue square, however, and it says click to copy table. So if you click the blue square that is next to your data and you just click open in StatCrunch, it will, voila, go ahead and open the data in StatCrunch into a nice long table. And then something else that I wanted to point out to you is that when we get to the homework problems, there's also often going to be a point that says something about tech help. Okay, tech help can be really nice to kind of guide you along through StatCrunch problems. This is also a good time to remind you that for tests and things like that, I will give you a list of StatCrunch steps. They're just steps that I took from my math lab, how they have it. I just organize them that way so you don't have to worry about kind of forgetting, because sometimes you get here and be like, oh wait, what do I need to do? I do ask you to write down in your interactive assignments, to write down how you did this in StatCrunch, just because it's easier to look at your paper than it is to like go back and be like, wait, what page was that I had those steps? Oh yeah, here it is. So that can just be sort of helpful. Again, is that you want to write down the StatCrunch steps as you're working on your interactive assignments, and then you can use those for the questions later on. You can click the blue square to open up the data. It's all good, you know, it hopefully makes your life much easier. I'm just clicking around to some of the other problems to kind of give you an idea. I clicked the last question inside here and it talks about this movement up and down. And again, you can then click anytime there's a blue square, you can open the data in StatCrunch, which is really nice. Later on in the class, there's sometimes problems where there is no blue square because there's no raw data. It's already summarized for you. And I'll show you how you can get to StatCrunch there. It's pretty simple. Again, I already showed you sort of the long way. Um, but there's lots of different ways to kind of get StatCrunch to make it as easy as possible. Okay, and now I went ahead and opened up just an quick little example that is inside the 2.2 interactive assignment, just to again show you just some different ways that it may look for StatCrunch. So example 5 says drawing a dot plot, and it says this is the text solution, the approach, the solution. It gives you the figure. Great. However, I want you to really try to, whenever you can, open the data in StatCrunch so you can just sort of see what it looks like. Again, if you want to do, you can click and drag your window and let go, and then bring this over so you can just sort of look at both screens. That really helps me as I'm getting older and I kind of forget things. And then sometimes the spacing is a little funky. I feel like right there, I just wanted to minimize my math lab so I could actually see the instructions. But says, for instance, if you click technology step by step, show StatCrunch. That's the most helpful button, I think, out of the whole course is show StatCrunch, and it'll walk you through essentially anything that's highlighted is usually what you want to make sure you focus on. So it just says hit graph, dot plot. You want to make sure you select the column. And it gives you a bunch of different options. Like you can label the axes and all kinds of crazy things. But we also don't need to do that. And so you just can click it. It makes a lovely graph for you. You can click this sandwich button and mess with the x-axis and the y-axis. You also can always click options edit and kind of go back to the original screen if you want to change anything. Like they have that you can add a mean and a median. You can change the point size. There's all sorts of things. The only thing you really need to do is to select the column. Okay, so again, I just wanted to highlight a few of these things that are come up inside of 2.2 and also 2.3. And then that way, when you get to sometimes later on, when we like have to use StatCrunch, you're like, okay, I've already seen StatCrunch. I already know how this is going to work. Let me show you one more example. Okay, I went ahead and jumped just to a random example in your 2.3 homework. 2.4 is all about like graphical mistakes, really. So there's not many actual examples of things you have to make or anything like that in that last section. So this is question 5 on 2.3. It gives some number of computers sold and or the price of the computers. So as you're looking through them, remember anytime you see a blue box, you want to go ahead and open that in StatCrunch. Okay. And again, remember the guided notebooks, ideally, you're just jotting down the exam. When you get to an example inside the interactive assignment that has the StatCrunch steps, you just sort of jot those steps down so you don't forget. Although, remember, I'm going to give you the steps for the test, but it's still just good to kind of, the more you can practice, the better. Okay. The steps in the test are kind of like, oh, wait, how do I do that again? And then you can reference them there. But in addition, just want to kind of plug a couple of the other features we have in here. So in addition to opening up the data in StatCrunch, there is an option for Help Me Solve This. There's an example for View an Example and Ask My Instructor. So just a quick little note about them. View an Example is really great. Just a side note though, View an Example is always going to, almost always going to tell you how to do this by hand, which is fine. It's great. I feel like the tricky part of this class is knowing when you want to be able to do something by hand or when you should do something by hand or when it's quicker and more efficient to just use technology, especially in these first few chapters where we're doing so much so fast, especially in chapter 3 when we're talking about standard deviation. You really don't want to calculate it by hand if possible. But View an Example will almost always show you how to do it by hand, even though it's really not going to be the most quick and efficient way. So just a little reminder, View an Example is great, but it'll always show you how to do it by hand. And sometimes it'll be like, oh gosh, this is so long. And it would be like much faster if we just use technology. Another helpful feature on here is Help Me Solve This. Help Me Solve This is very similar to View an Example. However, they actually like prompt you to answer questions in between. So for instance, this one says to create a stem and leaf plot, place the stems in a column starting with the smallest. What is the smallest stem? And so you have to actually answer the questions along the way, which is great. However, something else to keep in mind about Help Me Solve This is once you've completed Help Me Solve This, they're going to give you a whole different question from the original question that you had, which sometimes is fine. But sometimes if you already like are halfway through, it'll start your problem essentially over again with a new problem. And then lastly, this is one I really like right now. I'm sorry, I'm in preview mode, so I can't do this, but I promise you, you should, if you have any issues, let me know. But you should not get an error message. If you click Ask My Instructor, it'll come up with a prompt to send me an email. It'll come right to my email, and you can say whatever it is that you want to say. So you can write, I'm confused about this or that, or whatever is going on, and you send it to me, and that way I can reply back to you. It'll go my reply. If you send me and ask my instructor, my reply will go to your email, whatever email you use to actually make your Pearson account. Okay, so again, I know that was a lot of information. The main idea, though, is that you want to make sure that if there is an option in your interactive assignments to click open the data in StatCrunch and to view StatCrunch steps, please try those out in chapters 2 and 3 especially. They're going to be so helpful for you and make things so much faster starting in chapter 3 and 4. And then once we get to chapter 6, you don't even really have much of a choice. You have to use technology for some of them, whether it's StatCrunch or the graphing calculator. But I'm going to try to convince you that StatCrunch is the way to go because it copies the data over for you and you're less likely to make a mistake and all those things. Okay, so please keep me posted. Let me know however I can help. Again, chapter 2 is the time we're going to try out some of those StatCrunch features, and that way you can keep me posted on however you're feeling and it's not so scary later. Okay, thank you, class. Talk to you soon. Bye.